Hello everyone, time for another Gearotic video. This one may not be quite as short as the last. Today we're going to talk about racks, how to place them and how to deal with them. Racks actually came out in the last version, but I didn't speak of them, and you could only place them as a master and nothing could join them. You can now use them in simulations. You cannot put a rack on the screen as a master. It is considered a driven object only. So let's go get one. You'll find it in the non-circular portion underneath logarithmic gears and roots blowers. You'll see rack. You have a right tab and a left tab that you can turn on. Very shortly some clearance information will be given for those. At the moment there's not a lot you can change. The rim ratio will change, the sizing of the rack. The thickness of the rack will be whatever you put for thickness at the bottom here. To create a rack, you just simply hit create wheel. If you hit create pinion, you'll get a message warning you that only wheels are used in racks. So we'll hit create wheel. As I said, you cannot place them as masters. You can only place them on round gears. So let's place one here. And you can see you can roll it around the gear as you wish. You'll notice the rack actually slips back and forth a little bit, and this is to ensure that when you place a rack, it's pretty much centered on the gear, irrespective of where you have it on the roll. You'll also see that the placement ring on the round gear is moving in and out, turning red and blue and moving in and out. This is an indication of where the pitch line currently is. So when the circle appears at midpoint, that means that your tooth is perfectly centered onto one tooth space. Completely unimportant statistic, though. So let's just drop one. And here we have a rack on a gear. Now if we hit simulate, you can see that the rack rolls back and forth and then direction reverses when we hit an endpoint. Down here on the 3D properties screen, we now have a simulation blockage solution selection. Don't say that fast. We can choose ignore and loop, and if we do that, then when the simulation hits a point at which it would normally block, in this case because we're rolling off a rack, it'll just move the rack back to the beginning and roll it through again. So this is called simulation ignore loop. You can have stop selected, in which case when it hits the end of a rack it would simply stop. At that point you could go up and reverse manually and the system would repeat again until it hits the end of a point. Or you can have it where my original setting was reverse. So now when it hits the end of something, it will simply reverse. Now the system's pretty smart about all this. If we go back to tools and we select another rack and we place this rack on this first one, don't be fooled here, by the way. Right now you'll see the screen says set object position and then left click to set. Make sure that you do that second click. The first click, you select the rack you're going to put it on, and then by moving your mouse from one side of the rack to the other, you can select which side of the rack this particular rack point's going to be on. So here we'll just place that there. And now if we simulate, you can see we reverse at one end and the system will roll to the other end before it reverses. So it is aware of where the rack is. Now let's carry that one step further. Let's go back to circular and let's take a pinion and place a pinion on a rack. Now when you place a spur gear onto a rack, you have to select the segment of rack that you're going to place it on. So if I select this rack, for example, my gear has appeared and I cannot roll it off of the rack onto the next rack. That may be available sometime in the future, but at the moment you pick the segment of rack that you wish to put your gear on and roll it on and stick it on. And now if we hit simulate, you'll see that the system reverses when the first gear hits, but it'll also reverse when the second gear hits. So the system is aware of where your racks are. Now the racks can be cut only in 2.5 D, of course. And you're going to want to match your module of the rack with the module of your round gears that you're putting on. The system does not have a lot of safeties in it at the moment, so take care that you are actually meshing properly, because it is possible to select an improper mesh. You are free to do a rotate on gear, just as with most things. If we select this rack, for example, and say move on gear, you'll see that I'm actually moving the entire racked arrangement around on this gear. And again, if we hit simulate, we're now working the proper orientation. You can place gears at any normal. In other words, they can be off of a bevel gear, pointing off in space, whatever your imagination takes for you. And more changes will be coming up in the rack shortly, but I thought it might be handy for people to know exactly how they work. Thanks.